Welcome to this edition of Learning from Lenders. My name is James Mikell, Enterprise Executive with TurnKey Lender. Thank you for attending our session today. Today we are happy to announce the presentation that we'll have today from Corinne Bartow, Director of FinTech Partnerships at MX Technologies. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here, James, and I'm excited to dive into our conversation.
Well, thank you very much. Can you tell us a little bit about MX Technologies and your role at MX?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So for those that don't know us, MX is a financial data services provider. We basically provide connectivity and data enhancement of all financial data to power all kinds of financial related solutions, anything from back office capabilities to consumer apps. We do also provide some white label SaaS user experience tools, everything from things like budgeting widgets or solutions like that, financial wellness stuff to a full-blown mobile app, all of which we think are really powerful impacts on the user experiences and good examples of what can be done with such strong data underpinnings. My role here at MX, I'm focused on what we are calling strategic business development within the fintech ecosystem. So that means I work with partners like you at TurnKey, James, and I love doing that. I work every day with partners on working on our combined value propositions, making sure we are providing solutions that further enable our customers to do innovations and deliver to the market. And then also I work really across the ecosystem to make sure that the approach we have to how we're partnering and what we're doing and what we're focusing on is in line with what the market needs from us and where the opportunities are for us to have the greatest impact on our clients. I'm part of a really large partnership team at MX. I think got quite a number of experienced colleagues, so we're all focused on creating, managing, and growing partnerships that serve our common customers.
Fantastic. Of course, this has been a very challenging, 14 months or so in the fintech sector. What have you seen some through lines or trends that will probably come from the challenge that we've had, and especially as we go to move to recovery as well?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think really what has happened through the pandemic is that some of the current trends that were already underway have been accelerated in a big way. The number one is digital experiences, right? In the financial services world, everything's moving to the mobile device. It used to be that you could do some basic things on your mobile device, but you might still go into a branch or you might still get on a phone. I feel like not only are we doing more on our mobile devices, but we're more able, the tools are much more effective than they used to be, and that's only continuing to improve. So that's one trend that was already underway, but I think was really accelerated by the pandemic. I think it really forced the industry to look at, say, what role does brick and mortar have, and how much of that is where is that truly valuable, and how do we make sure that we balance that with, I'm sorry, you've got sirens because I'm in New York. Apologies for that background noise. The other trend that I think has been interesting to watch throughout this time is personalization of services. So if you think about, I think about personalization being an ad shows up on Facebook, and I just had that conversation with a friend, and it's kind of creepy, but that is not what personalization is in our industry, and it's not what we're trying to do. It's really about making sure that users are understood. So instead of working with personas and being abstract, the institutions that are servicing consumers really can know that consumer and what those consumers' needs are, and start providing much more helpful and useful solutions at the right time. And again, on that mobile device where we're interacting and engaging every day. So we're seeing an acceleration there, and we're seeing a lot of opportunities to continue improvements around personalization. Another trend that we see is this whole concept of embedded finance, where financial features are showing up in non-finance related applications. I think that's starting to take off. We're starting to see more of it. I don't know that the pandemic impacted that so much, other than there was all this sort of pent-up idea that maybe people were able to sit down and focus and actually start to resolve and bring to market. The last thing that we're seeing, and I don't know if this is related to the first item we talked about, which is digital experiences, or if it's just it takes time sometimes for skills to evolve in an industry, but what we're seeing is, and what I think is really exciting is established financial institutions really evolving how they think about partnering with fintechs and driving innovation out to their consumers. And again, I'm not sure how much of that is tied to the pandemic, other than I think maybe we all slowed down a little bit and we're able to think, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. How about you? Like, I'm curious.
I would definitely agree. I think the idea of KYC, improving the overall consumer experience has always been a motivation for across the entire sector. One of the biggest challenges for a lot of organizations, well, how do you focus on how do you get there? And I think what the pandemic has really kind of proved out, that it went for a plan that we might have had over, 5 or 8 year plan, has become something front and center because of the pandemic and limitations that were put upon a lot of institutions. So I think that's one of the lasting kind of effects we're going to have, is that we know we can go there. We can automate that process. We really can change that user experience. And so I think that's to the benefit. And speaking along those same lines, I think that there's also, there is the customer service aspect, of course, of all these engagements. But what are your thoughts around the utilization of other types of data and improving that overall fairness? What are your thoughts on that?
Good question. So I think that, if you look historically over the financial services industry, sort of the old way of deciding who's qualified for a loan or a mortgage or what products to offer people was based on a very narrow set of what was defined as sort of a good customer, right? What does a good customer look like? And I think when you look at, in all fairness, when you look backwards, the data that they had in order to drive those algorithms or those decisions was limited. And now we have all kinds of data. And I think the other piece of this that's kind of interesting is when you think about the permissioning or data privacy, right? Consumers need to know how their data is being used, but also that gives consumers the ability to say, I do want my data to be used to help me with this. And so the consumer can bring their data, and as much data as you have, that gives you more choices on how you're going to build your algorithms and how you can better serve people. So I just think we're at the very start of that journey, and that the outcomes we should expect are products that are, first of all, better aligned because we know more about a consumer. So we have that data. So we're offering them better products that are closer and a better fit for them. Hopefully products that are more fair, not only in how they're priced and how they're sold, but also in the reach that they have and the participation in these financial products by a much broader audience. And I think that is at its infancy today, quite frankly. We're working in this all day, and I think sometimes we think, oh, this is happening, and I think when I step back, I'm like, yes, it's happening, but it's not there yet. And so there's a ton of opportunity. We're really excited. It's one of the things that has us excited about partnering with you at TurnKey is that there's so much yet to be done, and there's a huge opportunity given that we know that the old methods of deciding who is qualified for what products are way too limited and way unfair to people. How about you? Is there more that you would add to that?
Yeah, definitely. I would agree. And one of the beauties of working with NMX Technologies is that not only is there the capabilities, of course, really kind of innovating and building out that digital banking front end for a lot of these organizations, but the ability to provide some of that non-traditional data, which really works perfect for our scoring models. So the ability for you to provide us with bank statement information, transactional data as an alternative means to score borrowers is a great new kind of way that we're looking to have more of a ensemble scoring models that we're able to build out that can eliminate a lot of maybe the unfair practices that are traditionally kind of utilized in kind of traditional scoring models. So yes, we still can use those traditional models, but that other data that you can provide to us is fantastic for your really fair modeling.
You're not limited. The other part about this, I think, is if you think about that underserved community, they maybe didn't know what products they should be asking for. So one of the areas that we see is an ability to provide personalized insights, right? How are you going to help users learn what they should be doing, what they should be asking for, what products might be available to them, or even like knowing that you're in the wrong product. Maybe you're in a high interest credit card and you should have a different solution. So I think the data is what powers all of that guidance that we want to be able to give users. And at MX, we talk a lot about our mission, which is to empower the world to be financially strong. And these are the kinds of use cases that just kind of light us all up. And we're really excited to see how this evolves and, how much empowering we can do for folks.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I do see we're starting to get some questions through the live stream. In addition, if we have anyone who'd like to ask more questions, please, through the social stream, please provide any questions that you may have. If you'd like, I'd like to give you a couple questions from the audience. Corinne.
Sure.
Perfect. The first one we do have is, in building out a partner network, which market segments of digitalization stand out?
Very interesting. So from where I'm sitting, so this is very much a lens of where I sit and live and breathe every day, and I look out, I'm seeing a couple of things that I think are really exciting. One is definitely consumer lending, specifically small dollar consumer lending, sort of helping those that need a bridge here and there, but maybe it's not a long-time loan. Those are really interesting use cases. There's a huge opportunity to better serve the gig economy. Those users are very non-traditional in almost every way, in the way they're paid, in the way they spend, in their needs for managing expenses for taxes, right? I wouldn't even say it's underserved. It's just not yet served. We have a couple of partnerships that we're seeing align there that we think are really interesting. Just better customer engagement and customer experience. So if you think about, I come from, before at MX, conversational AI space, so certainly chatbots are an area, but it's not the only area where the digitalization of the customer experience allows the right information being available, sort of on demand at the right time. You don't have to wait on a long call. You can get answers. So those are some areas that I think about. Certainly that's not all. There's a huge amount of new ideas or new startups that we talk to on a regular basis, and it certainly keeps me energized. There's a lot of opportunity.
Definitely.
How about you?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think one of the key elements, and it kind of really goes back to the comments from earlier, that it's improving that overall relationship. And one aspect of that is if you can remove some of the barriers that might have stopped someone from wanting to engage with their customers. And some of that can be just be a complicated process just to be onboarded, and that is a limiting factor in many cases. And I think what we've learned today, it's kind of the Amazon effect, right? Now everyone's used to being able to, log in, quickly go through a process, fill out a couple cells, transactions over with, and we're done and moving forward. And I think that now has kind of bled over into every human to system transaction that everyone's kind of involved in. So that's the expectation, which, right or wrong, I think that's kind of how we're moving forward, especially if you look at millennials and new consumers, that is the only world they're going to know. So if you have a old world kind of process where it's paper-driven, long process, maybe a decision not being rendered for hours or days, it's going to be a challenge moving forward, I think, just because of, the expectations.
I think about a bank, I won't name any names, that was basically every time an agent, a customer service agent, somebody who's supposed to be really helping consumers they come into a chat, they have an individual, it's about me in my situation question. The only responses those agents could use were in a spreadsheet, and they had to find the right response and copy it in. They weren't allowed to really actually answer the consumer's questions. And you could contrast that with, if you think about the power of search and the power of the data to know about me, right? When I ask a question, I might use the same words you would use. We might have two different meanings, and the opportunity for that engagement to be actually about what I need, because the institution I'm engaging with knows who I am and understands me. That's really powerful. And I think we're starting to see some of that, but it's a long way to go.
Yeah, definitely understood. Yeah. Hello, audience. Do we have any additional questions?
We don't. I have a question.
Okay, perfect.
All right. So as you are bringing your solutions to market, are there differences that you see in the North America market with the rest of the world? And where might we learn something from what's happening outside of our borders here?
Definitely. As an organization, we have clients in over 50 different countries. And one of the things you quickly learn as you kind of move, say, off of this continent and say you're working in other regions of the world is that the same way that you can decision and kind of evaluate borrowers dramatically changes from one area to another. So if you kind of look at traditional scoring, a lot of that traditionally, say in the U.S., is traditionally based on, FICO scores, data provided by the primary credit bureaus. Well, as you move into other regions, that type of data is not readily available. So the idea of being able to utilize other significant information that kind of gives you an insight into the borrower, it may be something as simple as their interactions in their mobile device. And we built in other regions, we built entire scoring models specifically around the activities of consumers on their mobile devices. In other cases, we may use more analytical, more information around psychometrics. And so, or even how you may move around within a network, a transactional network, and your behavioral patterns to actually build scoring models on those. There's a lot of behaviors that are pretty consistent in many ways that kind of will give you insight onto a borrower based on how they interact with technology or with different systems. And so we've built over 50 some odd different scoring models based on all of these different elements, in addition to the personalized custom ones we built for many of our FI clients as well. So we do see it. So I see more and more of the things that we may do outside of the U.S. coming into this marketplace, such as more of the bank statement scoring, cash flow underwriting type of processes really starting to become more and more prevalent for sure.
So the need to innovate was driven by the lack of the infrastructure that we had here, right? So
it's just not there.
Yeah, I think that's not an uncommon pattern. Somebody's asking about, I think, the MX culture. What's the culture like, and how do we continue to innovate? I have to say that a lot of that comes from our early co-founders and early executives who just have a very strong belief. One of the values the company holds is something called the founder's mindset. We're certainly very keen on enabling individuals to speak up, have their voices heard, propose ideas, innovate, try things, fail quickly, move on. All the things that you hear about from tech companies that are able to fast move. In addition, I think we have a really inspiring group of leaders from a standpoint of the way they view the world, not just from an opportunity standpoint, but from a need to do things well and to contribute. And again, it drives the company's mission. And one of the great things that I've found being at MX is we don't just speak our mission, we live it, and that creates a lot of, I would say, sense of shared purpose, which helps the organization as we're growing rapidly to remain innovative and really drive for what can make an impact on the world.
Oh, perfect. I have one other additional question from the stream as well. There's a fear of the data being utilized, not being utilized unresponsibly for end users. Will there be a counter trend toward further data gathering regulation?
There's certainly going to be something, right? The U.S. in particular is behind, and depending how you look at it, regulatory environments in other spaces. Absolutely. The data we're talking about is the consumer's data. The consumer owns it. The consumer should be permissioning how it's used, where it lives, when it gets removed, when access gets revoked. And so what is a little bit promising is that the industry agrees. It's not universal, of course, but if you look at what most leaders are at least saying publicly in our space is that, yes, this is about consumers and protecting consumers, but it's also about empowering consumers. So I think when the risk is if the industry didn't step up and honor those tenets, then regulatory bodies would have to step in, and that might then shut down opportunities for consumers, and we don't want that. We want to make sure that we're growing the pie with the consumers, but that we are honoring that basic tenet that it's their data, they own it, and they get to decide how and when it gets used.
And that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I have one last question for you.
All right.
So the question is, if you were speaking to someone who is either just starting out, thinking of moving into fintech, or making a pivot into fintech sector, what type of advice would you get to them as they're starting to make this plunge?
So my number one advice for anybody starting anywhere is embrace your curiosity and feed it and grow it, because you can only learn when you're open-minded and you're looking, right? So none of us know everything, and when you're first starting out, there's a huge opportunity. You sort of have more permission than others because you're don't know everything, to ask questions and to be a sponge and to suck it all in. So I think that's hugely important. There's some really good sources, and anybody wants to connect on LinkedIn, I can share what those are. I won't do any advertisements for my favorite right now. But when you want to learn about the industry, there's some really great newsletters, sites, blogs that you can go to, including, of course, TurnKeys and ours, but many, many others. And I think there's a lot of these types of events that are happening that provide insights and help you see what not only what we're seeing when you're talking to people, but how they approach it, and it's just a great opportunity to learn. So I think that curiosity is the number one thing. The only other thing that I would add is don't get stuck in a path. Be willing to have some breath and try some different things, because even if you step out of your comfort zone and you decide to go back, you learn something and it made you stronger in what you go back to doing. Is that what you're looking for?
Fantastic answer. Well, I want to thank you so much, Corinne, for sharing your time with us today. It's been a very insightful conversation. We greatly do appreciate you sharing your views on many of these very important subject matters. If anyone out there has any questions to MX Technologies, please reach out to Corinne Bartow over at MX Technologies, and as well, you can reach out to us over at TurnKey Lender as well. Thank you very much for your time today, everybody.